Hi, this is Courtney Cleftis, founder of the Goddess Foundation. Welcome back to the Goddess Foundation podcast, season 1, episode 3. Today, I will be piloting a brand new series, an introductory series, walking you through 9 titles that I've selected as really solid introductory books to the concept, history, theory, philosophy, experience, and or practice of contemporary goddess spirituality, which I've touched upon here. This is a library guide or LibGuide I created through my current library science. I'm working towards my master's in library science, which I believe I've mentioned in other episodes. And in a course I took in, let's see, the publication date, February 2019. So back in the spring semester of 2019, I was taking a course that involved the creation of LibGuides, and I chose as my topic an introduction to the goddess movement and theology as opposed to theology. Thea meaning goddess, and logi, logos, meaning study of or words, so essentially the study of the goddess. So I will provide a link to this LibGuide in the notes, but I will just offer a brief overview. There's the home, some suggested call number ranges using Library of Congress, the Library of Congress classification system, some encyclopedias, databases if you have access through an academic and or public library to say At Live Religion database or Gender Watch. That's a great resource. Some recommended journals, places to further deepen your studies of the goddess, especially at the California Institute of Integral Studies. They have an MA PhD program, and I believe it's in women's spirituality. I don't know if the exact title of the program has changed, but that's a really solid place to look if you really want to do a deep dive, if you really want to open Pandora's box, which after exploring these 9 titles, which I will feature in this 3-part podcast series, you just might want to do. Pandora's beckoning. And evil is not what will be unleashed. That's just what the patriarchy wants you to believe. Some introductory mythologies and edited collections, some of which I've included. I'm working exclusively with goddess books that I currently have checked out from the library and or in my personal library. So it's a bit limited by that due to those parameters, but there are many more options and places to look and explore that I've linked to on this LibGuide. So check it out. Second page is Foremothers of the Goddess Movement. Maria Gimbutas, a controversial figure, but definitely worth an exploration. I encourage you very much to read her work and make your own decision or make your own judgment on the validity and value of her research, which again was rather controversial. A few books about theology, one of which, Introducing Theology, is one of the 9 books that I will be covering in this series. What else do we have here? Unfortunately, I don't have either of these 2 books here. When God Was a Woman by Merlin Stone. It's from 1976. Yeah, that was about 11 years, I think, before I was born, so predates me. But it was right in the heyday of the goddess spirituality movement, which really emerged in the 1970s as part of the second wave feminism movement. And the third and final is a topic of interest, as you know, given this year's theme of finding the goddess hidden in plain sight in the 3 Abrahamic religions. I had a section here on divine feminine in Judeo-Christianity. I know I mentioned this book, Sophia, Goddess of Wisdom, which I will have a book talk podcast series on. Well, not a series, probably just an episode. And I would love to interview the author, but that might be aiming too high. And just a few other recommended resources and recommended search terms if you want to do a library search at a library near you. So just a reminder, what is the goddess movement and why is it significant? And this is what I wrote back in 2019. The goddess and or women's spirituality movement, beginning during the second wave of feminism in the US during the 1970s, serves as an attempt to challenge the patriarchy and patriarchal religions by reclaiming the feminine in the divine. Some central principles of goddess spirituality include belief in an immanent rather than transcendent deity, a goddess who lives among us, with us, inside us, not above and beyond us, as well as a reclamation of numerous indigenous beliefs from across the globe that celebrate the sacredness of the earth, Gaia in Greek terms, herself. While there is significant overlap between the goddess and neo-paganism movements, including Wicca and Druidry, this guide serves as a resource exclusively for goddess spirituality as its own autonomous field of study and practice. So one observation that I didn't have an opportunity to incorporate into this guide, the goddess is very much an earth-based spirituality and spiritual practice. The danger of reclaiming indigenous beliefs is that you run the risk of cultural misappropriation. So it needs to be engaged with in a sensitive way. And what I recommend doing is working with the spirits of the land, often known as the Fae in the Celtic traditions, or perhaps the nymphs of the ancient Greek mythology, but working with these land spirits wherever it is that you physically reside, and or tapping into your own biological ancestry and learning more about the indigenous practices and beliefs of that heritage. So for instance, my ancestry is a combination of Scottish, Irish, and Greek Albanian. So I do a lot of work with the Fae from the Celtic pantheon, and with Nymphs, the hummingbird goddess, whom I believe I've mentioned before, appears as a sort of like fairy queen, but with a very Hellenic twist. She appears as a nymph. So finding ways to work with land spirits, but without appropriating other cultures, essentially. And that is just, I could go off on a long tangent on that, and I do anticipate having episodes that address the very important issue of cultural appropriation, which unfortunately is common in some of the more new agey, more superficial strains or strands of goddess spirituality, which I do not support in any way, shape, or form. So anyway, let's get down to business to defeat the Huns. Sorry, my wife and I were watching Disney movies last night, and so Mulan popped into my head. Speaking of cultural appropriation, Exhibit A. All right, so let's launch into the first 3 books, An Intro to Goddess Spirituality. I've chosen 9, partially because of the symbolic resonance of that number, associated with the 9 muses of Greek mythology, all daughters of, and I'm going to mispronounce her name, Mnemosyne, I believe. And that is essentially the goddess or personification of memory itself. So trying to revive the memory of the goddess who resides within us. So it seemed appropriate to invoke the muses through the selection of 9 texts. All right, so the first one is, I'm going to stop the share and come back to it. I don't know if that will make this video jerky. Actually, I think I'm going to just keep it up. But I will be looking at, first and foremost, this book, The Goddess Path, Myths, Invocations, and Rituals by the late Patricia Monaghan. In spite of my Irish and Scottish heritage, I don't know yet how to pronounce Irish and or Scottish last names. All right, well, this book was actually my very first foray into the world of the goddess, which I purchased on impulse about a month after my mom's unexpected death in October of 2012. And I, since then, have definitely opened Pandora's box and dug much deeper, even beyond the 9 books that I will be discussing today. All right, so in the goddess path, Patricia, I'm going to refer to her by her first name for ease, since I don't know how to pronounce her last name correctly, and I do not want to offend her. So the very introduction to the book is an overview of goddess spirituality, defining the goddess, basics of goddess spirituality, images of the goddess, ritual in the goddess. And she has an index of goddesses, as well as numerous invocations to the goddess from ancient texts, which I don't know if she herself translated them. I suspect she drew on published translations. And then she works with a series of different goddesses from across the globe, starting with Gaia. And I will go to the section on the Muses, which she writes about as the epitome of inspiration. And she writes about this about midway through the book. And this will give you just an overview of how she's structured the book and how you can use it. So I will momentarily launch into reading a few excerpts from her section on the Muses. She has numerous other goddesses, including Gaia, symbolic of abundance, Athena, strength, Hera, dignity, Hera being the oft demonized wife of Zeus, Aphrodite, passion, Kuan Yin, mercy. So they're not all from the Greco-Roman pantheons. We have Inanna, inner strength, Breed or Brigid, survival, Oshun, healing love, Kali, freedom. And if you don't recognize these names, that's okay. I highly recommend getting this book. And it offers a cursory overview of the mythology and lore surrounding each of these goddesses and or goddess collectives like the Muses, as well as sections on how to work with these goddesses. And she includes journaling questions and prompts. So let's move ahead to, pardon, someone's car alarm is going off. It's always my worst nightmare. So I do apologize, ambient noise, but everything is divine, including car alarms going off. All right, so here we go. Here is the section, the Muses, inspiration. And the chapter starts with an invocation. Then she goes into the myth and meaning of the Muses. So let's see. The Greek goddesses of art and inspiration are the most familiar ancient divinities today, for we still invoke them constantly when we muse on something, when we are amused, when we go to museums, when we listen to music. We hear their name many times daily, although few recognize it as an echo of ancient goddess religion, growing dimmer and dimmer with each passing century. Just skimming through. Most commonly, it was said that there were 9 muses: Clio or Cleo, fame giver, ruler of history; Euterpe, joy giver, the muse of lyric poetry; the festive Thalia, muse of comedy; the singing Melpomene, Thalia's opposite, the muse of tragedy; Terpsichore, lover of dancing, who ruled choral song as well as dance; Erato, awakener of desire. Ruler of erotic poetry, so perhaps Sappho was a devotee of Erato. Polyhymnia or Polymnia, the meditating one, whose name means many hymns and who inspired them; Urania, heavenly, muse of astronomy; and Calliope, beautiful voiced, ruler of epic poetry. I was going to say something and I just forgot. I hope I didn't totally mispronounce their names. So she has a section on symbols of the Muses, for instance, Melpomene, the Mask of Tragedy, and Vine Leaves. She talks about various feast days of the Muses. Apparently, and I don't know, she doesn't cite her source for this, unfortunately, but according to Patricia, their birthday as a collective is recorded as being on June 14th. She has suggestions for invoking the Muses. She says, Muses are not served by our contemplative order. To honor them, we must create. So find some way of channeling the Muses through your creative writing. Maybe you write poetry, maybe you sing. You could invoke the Muses just by singing in the shower or dancing to one of your favorite songs. And when working with the Muses, don't force yourself into the patriarchal headset or mindset of perfectionism. And I, as a perfectionist, what I would say is do what I say, not what I do. But honor their energy by relinquishing those impossible standards and just letting yourself go, surrendering to their muse. Patricia reinforces this, saying, the process of creation is more important than the resulting product. And to me, that is a quintessentially goddess concept. It's very much process oriented rather than end product, cyclical rather than linear. It's all about being in the here and now and just relishing and reveling in that. And the Muses can help you do that. And then she ends this section on the Muses with a series of questions and activities that she encourages you to explore. Let's see, I will just read a couple of them. Get some finger paints or crayons, spend time playing, remember what it was like to create as a child. So the Muses create in a playful, uninhibited manner. Make a list of artists you admire. What is it about them that draws you? In what ways do you want to be like them? In what ways are they perhaps your muse? Put on some music and sing, or at least hum along to it. If you feel inhibited, ask yourself why. What inner messages do you give yourself about your singing abilities? And the last question that she asked, which I think is really provocative, if you could create only one work of art before you died, what would it be? What's stopping you from creating that artwork now? Very, very, very deep stuff that may surface if you do choose to work with the Muses, and just starting with some of these questions and activities. So the book continues in that vein. Again, each section is on a different goddess or collective of goddesses like the Muses, and includes information about their mythology and or lore, their rituals and feast days, and ways in which you can intentionally work with them in the here and now in our contemporary, sadly, often very goddess-averse society. And I will provide a link in the show notes to Patricia's website with a bunch of information about her. I mean, her biography alone is incredibly extensive, and there are links to her works, some of her poetry. So she clearly was aligned with the Muses. And I haven't found the Muses mentioned in any other goddess anthologies. So I think she deliberately chose to work with them and to include them because she is very much in their web, ensnared in their web, but in a very positive and inspiring way. All right. So the next book on our list is The Myth of the Goddess, Evolution of an Image by Anne Baring and Jules Cashford. And these two women, both I believe are or were, I believe they're both still living, but I'm not 100% certain on that. So don't quote me on it. They are or were both Jungian psychoanalysts, and they chose to attack the concept of the goddess throughout world history through the lens of psychology, specifically Jungian depth psychology. And then this book, I will just read a little bit about it to give you an overview. So it starts with the section, part 1 is devoted to the mother goddess archetype and her son lover. And it moves in chronological order, starting in the Paleolithic era, moving into the Neolithic era. So this has a quite extensive span of time. Moving to Minoan Crete just shortly before the Hellenic period in ancient Greece. She writes here a little bit about Ariadne, whom you may know from Greek mythology as the princess who helped Theseus, the hero, slay the Minotaur, her fearsome half bull, half human brother. And he abandoned her on an island. Not a real classy dude, but she ended up working out all right, getting married, getting hitched to Dionysus, the great god of ecstatic ritual. And he was one of the few male gods that I've encountered who was not a total douchebag when it came to women. And some have actually argued that Dionysus is more of a non-binary figure, very transgressive and fluid in his or perhaps their gender identity. I say his because those are the pronouns that were used in all of the ancient Greek writings, but Dionysus is one of the less patriarchally infected male or masculine of center gods. But that's a topic for another time. She goes into part 2 is devoted to the concept of the sacred marriage or the Hieros Gamos. And this is the part of the book where she moves into chapters that are dedicated to goddesses or goddess figures within the Judeo-Christian imagination, starting with Eve, the mother of all living, Mary, the return of the goddess, and Sophia, mother, daughter, and bride. And then she ends her book with the final chapter about the sacred marriage of goddess and god, archetypal feminine and masculine, yin and yang, the reunion of nature and spirit, which to her is the quintessential sacred marriage. I keep referring to this book as Dr. Baring's book, but it's actually co-authored. So according to them, not her. So there are numerous illustrations in this book. It is incredibly well researched. The only criticisms I've encountered to date are that this book is, on a perhaps superficial level, promotes gender essentialism, which in other words, equates women with their biological femininity, if you will. Equating goddess with certain biological restrictions or limits, and equating goddess with exclusively the mother archetype. And I very much I was drawn to the goddess paradigm through the loss of my mother. So I do very much identify with the goddess as mother, but she's so much beyond that. And one possible limitation of this book is that it might be a bit overly focused on the goddess as mother principle. But read it for yourself. It's been a while since I read it, so I will probably at some point need to be rereading it, and keeping that in mind as I go, seeing if there's a way to rehabilitate the mother archetype, expand it beyond really limiting, confining, stereotypical notions of motherhood. How can we reclaim motherhood without being restricted to it? But once again, I highly recommend this book, and I will also post links to Anne Baring's website. She has numerous other books, also very extensive bibliography. I didn't know until I went to this site that she at one point was into fashion design, so quite an interesting life and kind of labyrinthine career path. And I could not find a website about Jules Cashford, but here's a brief bio on this website, the Gaia Foundation, which I also was unfamiliar with, and I will provide links to this in the show notes as well. So last but not least, we are moving on to a book included in the collected works of Joseph Campbell, a great American mythologist. I learned recently that we almost share a birthday. I mean, obviously not anywhere near the same decade, but both born towards the end of March. That kind of narcissistic aside, take a look at this really, really recent publication. I believe it's from within the past 3 years. Let me double check. 2013. Nope, I was wrong. Within the past 10 years. This book is, like I said, part of the collected works of Joseph Campbell, and it is entitled Goddesses, Mysteries of the Feminine Divine. And it is edited, I believe, by, yes, Safron Rossi, a scholar and astrologer who works and teaches at the Pacifica Graduate Institute in California. In any case, she compiled all of his writings from throughout his vast career that address topics related to the goddess and the divine feminine. And she includes a foreword, an introduction on the great goddess, and then she moves into a range of his works on different gods and goddesses of the ancient world through the lens of the divine feminine. So it starts with an editor's foreword. She writes that one of Campbell's favorite themes is the transformation and endurance of the archetypal symbolic powers of the feminine divine, despite the past 2,000 years of patriarchal and monotheistic religious traditions that have attempted to exclude them. End quote. This is on the first page of her foreword, Roman numeral 9. I would argue that the goddess was not only excluded, but really violently suppressed. So she includes an introduction on the great goddess, what goddess means, through both a psychological and a mythological perspective. She has sections on the degradation of the goddess and her recent return in the predominantly Western world. I mean, she never fully disappeared in the Eastern traditions like Hinduism, for instance, but she's definitely had a recent resurgence, especially since the 1970s here in the US and just in the Western English-speaking world more generally. And then, so chapter by chapter, is in some respects is similar to or mirrors the work of Anne Baring and Jules Cashford, The Myth of the Goddess, also adopting a somewhat depth psychological lens, and also covering Campbell's writings on the goddess ranging from in a chronological order. So starting with the goddess in Paleolithic cultures, moving on to the Neolithic age, ancient Sumeria, ancient Egypt, the goddesses and gods of the Greek pantheon. And all of this ends with chapter 7, Mysteries of Transformation, engaging with the mystery cults of ancient Greece. For instance, the Eleusinian mysteries, which centered around the mysteries of life, death, and rebirth through the lens of the abduction and rape of Persephone, as well as the Dionysian mysteries and how Dionysus connects to the divine feminine, which, like I mentioned earlier in this episode, is a topic of fascination, and I will definitely be covering that in much greater depth in a later episode. And then he ends with the feminine as the feminine appears in European romance, the courtly love tradition, the troubadours, subtly encoded in this rich tradition. And then let's see if there's anything else I wanted to say. Looks like, according to the book flap summary, between 1972 and 1986, just a year, I believe, before he died, Campbell gave over 20 lectures and workshops on goddesses, exploring the figures, functions, symbols, and themes of the feminine divine, following them through their transformations across cultures and epochs, especially in the Western world. So once again, Safron Rossi, the editor, collected and compiled all of these writings and workshops. Many, I believe, audio recordings or video recordings probably available on this website, the Joseph Campbell Foundation, and or through Pacifica's own Opus Archives. They have a rich Joseph Campbell collection, and I once again will be posting those links in the show notes. But she did a lot of extensive work just pulling all of his writings on the goddess together, as I would imagine, were incredibly scattered prior to this undertaking that she undertook. It's quite a massive undertaking. And the last thing I have for you today is, oops, I can move this down. Safron Rossi's own webpage. This is her more recent book, The Core Goddess, Kore being maiden. And Persephone is often actually referred to just as Kore, maiden, almost like without a name, which is problematic, but probably a topic that she brings up in this really recent publication. And she has the book launch video published on her website. So just to wrap things up today, I will include a list of the 6 remaining books that I will be covering, offering a very cursory overview like I've done today in the 2 upcoming episodes. But we will conclude today's episode with a brief oracle card reading using another oracle card deck that I own, which, let me open the page to it. It's called Goddess on Earth Oracle, a divination deck and guidebook by, excuse me, her name is Lisa Levart, I believe. I could be mispronouncing her name. And Lisa, if you're listening, I do sincerely apologize. One of my friends and fellow goddess scholars, Dr. Annalisa Dare, whose website I will also include in the show notes, was actually featured in this oracle. She was photographed as Mary Magdalene. And that speaks to the very nature of this oracle deck. Lisa reached out to women who are devoted to the goddess in some way, shape, or form, and they selected goddesses that they wish to be photographed as. So we will start with a reading from this deck. Let's see who we get. It's a really nice oracle deck. Let me shuffle the cards. See which goddess has wisdom to share with us today. Speaking to our introductory overview of goddess studies, just in general. All right. Let's see. I pulled the card Treasure Your Gifts, number 2. Let's see who that is. A woman lying on a forest floor, dimly lit, looks like it's twilight or dusk outside, and she is in naked recline on the forest floor. Looks very comfy, moss. All right, well, let's see what we have to say about that in the guidebook. It's card number 2. Ooh, I don't know this goddess. All right, this is a Norse goddess of fertility. And her name is Sif, or Sif. I don't know how to pronounce that. Pardon my horrendous Norse or Norwegian. These are her attributes. With cascading hair the color of sun-drenched wheat, Sif is known not only for her extraordinary beauty, but her union with Thor, the god of thunder and lightning. The divine marriage of the earth goddess and the sky god is responsible for the fertility of the soil and all that grows from it. Although little is recorded about this deity, perhaps why I had never heard of her, one story remains. The trickster god Loki cuts off Sif's hair while she is asleep on a soft mound of moss, as depicted in this beautiful, excruciatingly beautiful photograph. So Loki cuts off her hair while she's asleep on this soft mound of moss. Enraged, Thor, god of lightning and thunder and lightning, who is her consort, her male consort, he threatens to kill Loki until Loki replaces Sif's hair with silk that is made of golden strands. Lisa's fantastic oracle deck, the guidebook coming along with it includes the perspective of the woman photographed, whose name is Christina Wright, a psychotherapist. And Christina goes into why she chose this particular goddess, why she wanted to be photographed as this Norse goddess. And then the deck and the oracle ends with a section on taking action. And it says here on the deck, treasure your gifts. So treasure your natural gifts, give them the honor and attention they deserve. Don't take them for granted. To sum it up. And I thought it was very interesting that in the brief overview or summary of who this goddess is, the sacred marriage is mentioned. And that is a central theme in one of the three books that were selected for today, The Myth of the Goddess by Anne Baring and Jules Cashford. So that seems fitting. All right, so we will end there. Stay tuned for 2 more episodes, 2 follow-up episodes to conclude this series with 6 more phenomenal texts about the goddess to sink your teeth into. Until next time, I look forward to seeing you all soon.